Hello, I'm Tiffany Cloud. Welcome to The Storm, and thank you for watching today on WYLN 35. If you're a student getting ready to explore colleges, or if you're a parent who feels a bit overwhelmed by the entire college application process, this is the show for you. I'm so pleased to be joined by Tanya DuBois of College Counseling of Southwest Florida, a true expert in this entire process. And I must confess, I'm a fan of hers, as she's also my sister. We're talking about college counseling today on The Storm, only on WYLN 35. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm joined today by Tanya DuBois. She is with College Counseling of Southwest Florida, and she's also my sister. I am so excited to have you here on The Storm.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And the irony is you're actually here because of a storm. We're taping this show on the heels of a hurricane, which hit and really did a lot of damage to Naples, which is where you're from. So you've been seeking refuge here at home with me.
Yes, very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to have you here. And you know, I've been wanting to do this show with you for a long time. I actually had talked to you in the past about you possibly calling into the show because I just feel as though a parent, a student can never get enough good advice about the whole college application process. It's different than when I was a kid. It's daunting. A lot of it's electronic. It can be scary for parents of my generation, certainly. So you're an expert. I'm thrilled to have you on. And I want to start with the broad question, Tanya, of you just telling the audience a bit about your background.
Sure. First of all, when I was in college myself, I always knew I wanted to get into either the admission side or the college counseling side. Wasn't sure which side of the desk. So as a student at the University of Richmond, I had the opportunity to actually work inside the admission office. Even as a student, I was allowed to sit in on all of the admission committee decision meetings, and I got to see how they made their choices about whom to accept, whom to deny, and whom to waitlist. So it was a really, really wonderful experience, even as a student myself. And then I spent the first 10 years of my career working at a college prep school like an MMI or Wyoming Seminary or Scranton Prep, and had the opportunity to work with many wonderful students and parents. And then after that, spent 10 more years working in marketing and communications, which is key when you're trying to put it bluntly, sort of sell yourself to a college who's looking at your resume and so on. And then opened my own business, so now working with families one-on-one.
Right, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you decided to get into college counseling.
I had the most amazing college counselor, and that's what did it for me. He armed me with information. He told me what to do and when to do it. He sat and met with me one-on-one. He understood what I was looking for in a college, and he gave me a list. And he said, based on everything you told me, these are 25 schools I think you should look into. And it made it so easy, stress-free. I knew exactly what to do. And so that's always my goal. That's what I want to do for the families I work with.
Okay, and throughout the show, I'll be reminding people, but if people want to learn about you, you're at collegecounseling.swfl.com, and you're also on Facebook as College Counseling of Southwest Florida.
Correct.
And you will do counseling for people even over the phone, long distance. You know, there's certain fees that apply, et cetera, but you can, if somebody in the greater Hazleton area wants either a second opinion, a new opinion, you know, isn't happy with the guidance they're getting, or just wants to make sure they're getting the right guidance, they can give you a call.
Absolutely. I'm happy to help anyone who needs it.
Okay, well, let's talk about the circumstances under which a person would decide to get a private college counselor like yourself.
I think when you go to a really small high school where you have a really good college counselor to student ratio, you're fine. If you have an older sibling who's been through the process before and your parents kind of know how to navigate the whole system, you're fine. But for a student, for example, in the Hazleton area school district, where the student to counselor ratio is 575 to 1, they might need to reach out to someone else for help.
500 and what?
575 to 1.
Wow. And they're not just doing college counseling.
No, they're doing all sorts of things. I have a great deal of empathy for counselors because imagine having that caseload. You know, what kind of guidance can you really provide? It must be a challenge both for the counselor and for the students and the families.
Is that ratio that we have here in the Hazleton Area School District, is that typical from what you see, say, down in Florida or in other places?
In Florida, in the county where I live, the ratio is 300 to 1, and the average in the state of Pennsylvania is 294 to 1.
Okay.
So I would say it's not really typical.
It's double.
Correct.
It's double, so that's not good.
Right.
So all the more reason that a show like this is really important. So we have so many colleges and universities across this country. How do you help a student just step one, narrowing down the whole process of which schools to even consider?
It can be overwhelming. So let's start with this.
I've been wondering why you brought the candy. This has been in my house all day long, and you wouldn't let me eat it. So I can't wait to now finally find out what it's all about.
Well, everyone in the studio will be happy, I think, when we're finished, too. So how many M&Ms do you think are in this jar?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, 1,000.
Okay. So there's 4,140 candies in the jar, and what that represents is the number of colleges and universities in the United States. So if you think about the fact that your child is going to go to this one, the question is, how do you get there? It can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
So what I like to start with is geography. Sometimes your child will make it easy for you, and they'll say, I want to stay in the state. If someone says, I want to stay in the state of Pennsylvania, that narrows it right down to 211 schools, no problem. If a student says, I want to stay east of the Mississippi, then you're only, halfway. So I start with geography. Sometimes that's a huge help.
Okay.
Also having to do with geography is there are people who enjoy the metropolitan lifestyle, the urban lifestyle. There are those who prefer a suburban setting. There are those who like a more rural setting. And so helping students hone in on that, sometimes as a 17-year-old, they don't really know. So they really need to go visit a city school, a suburban school, and a rural school, and sort of see what appeals to them. So geography, those types of settings and size. For students who imagine themselves at a big university, I know where I live, the Florida State system is very popular. I believe here Penn State is very popular. You can imagine in a school with tens of thousands of students, those first few years you're sitting in a lecture hall often with hundreds of other students, sometimes with a teaching assistant teaching courses. If that is your style, that's great. Some students prefer the one-on-one attention. They prefer sitting around a table with a class of 12. So helping to identify what size school a student might want, I think, is really important. And then, of course, the availability of your major, any extracurricular that might interest you, and that sort of thing. But that just sort of helps you narrow down and get to work with a manageable handful.
Okay. The next segment, we're going to dig a little bit more into the type of coursework that a student should be looking to do and how things can match up with colleges and what they're looking for, importantly. So with that, we will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. I am here with my sister, Tanya DuBois of College Counseling of Southwest Florida, and we are continuing a conversation about the entire college application process, figuring out which college is right for you or your child. If you're just joining us, this jar of candy is to represent all of the colleges and universities across the country, and we're talking about how to narrow it down to that one college that's right for you. I'm going to eat Colgate University, which is my alma mater, and ask you the next question, which is, how important is a high school student's coursework, and what would you say are the most common mistakes that are made?
The high school transcript is the single most important thing on the college application. So, of course, your coursework and your grades. If you go to any college website, they'll tell you what the minimum requirements are. And often the minimum requirements are 3 years of each major. So the majors would be math, English, history, science, and foreign language. What they really want to see, however, especially at the more select schools, is 4 years of every one of those majors, including foreign language.
Really?
Yes, the single biggest mistake students make is taking only 2 or 3 years of foreign language.
Oh, interesting. How about the benefits of taking more challenging coursework like AP classes?
Parents ask me this question all the time because they say, well, my student can take the regular class and definitely get an A, but if they take the AP, they might get a B. And what I tell them is, if you think they can get a B, take the AP. So let me explain how it works a little bit.
Okay.
So first of all, just to define an AP course, it stands for Advanced Placement. The idea is that the coursework itself is college level work, but you can take the course in high school. At the end of the year, you take an exam. If you get a 4 or 5 on the exam, most colleges will then give you college credit, and you don't have to retake that course again when you're in college. But getting back to the college application process, if you take an AP course and you get a B in it, that's a 3. What most colleges do is they weight your GPA using their own system. Most colleges add a point for an AP, so it becomes a 4.0.
Oh.
They add a point for an IB, I don't know if you have IB in Pennsylvania, or ACE, and they add a half a point for honors. So if you're on the fence between taking the more advanced course or the less advanced course, it's always a good idea, and you will get a bump from those college admission officers.
I did not know this. Okay, I'm so glad, because in 5 years or so I'm going to be dealing with the same thing, and it is so different. In fact, one of the other things I was wondering about when I went through this process 1,000 years ago, liberal arts colleges were all the rage, and the liberal arts education was all the rage, and getting that well-rounded background was the thing to do. Is it very important that you're well-rounded, and is there a need to join every club and organization that you can, or is that not the case anymore?
It has changed a bit. You're right. When we applied to college, we felt the need to join every organization imaginable. If you think about it from the college's perspective, what they're trying to do is build a class. So they need artists and musicians and athletes and intellectuals and all sorts of people to build a good, well-rounded class. What happens is, if you apply to a school and you've done a million different things, they aren't really sure which niche you're going to fill once you get there. And so it's always best to pick something that you really love, something about which you're very passionate, be consistent, take your participation in this all the way up through some sort of leadership position. Have that interest also be reflected in your coursework, your community service, your summer jobs, your internships, to really let the college know that it's a genuine interest, and then they know that you can fit that niche in their school.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, now what would be your best advice, switching gears a little bit, regarding SATs and SAT testing?
The first thing is to relax. I think the very first time a student goes to take the SAT, they should just sort of consider it a benchmark. I'm just going to go take it without practicing and see how I score. And then you can sort of see the areas where you need to improve, really work on those, and then take the test again. And students can take the SAT test over and over and over and over as many times as they wish. And most universities will super score, meaning they'll take your best verbal and your best math score and combine them. So first time around, relax. The next time around, practice. But also, don't forget that the ACT is an option. Back when we were applying to school, ACTs were really only accepted in Midwest universities. Now they're accepted everywhere. And even at Penn State, for example, they accept ACTs in lieu of SATs if you prefer that test. And so if the SAT isn't really clicking for a particular student, they might want to consider at least taking a practice ACT test online and see if maybe it suits them a little better.
Okay. I find that a lot of my friends who have children about applying for colleges, they seem to be, they're applying earlier and earlier. And I know there's something called early action and there's something called early decision. And there may be some confusion out there among parents as to what the difference is. If you could help us understand that and why people are applying earlier.
I sure can. Let's first talk about why it's an advantage to apply early. So shortly after you and I applied to school, magazines like U.S. News and World Report started putting out college rankings. And there are all sorts of statistics that get used to determine a college's rank on these lists. One of the most important is yield, meaning the number of accepted students who end up enrolling. So again, if we think about it from the college's side, If someone applies to you early, you can be pretty sure they're more interested in you than maybe they are in other schools. So it does give you an edge because from their perspective, they think you're more likely to enroll. So the difference between early action and early decision is something to be taken very, very seriously. It's binding. If you get accepted to that one school you apply to early decision, you must go.
Okay.
I do not recommend that for most students. You definitely should have visited lots and lots of schools and be absolutely certain. The other thing is if a student's applying for financial aid, they apply early decision, they have no room to negotiate. Your financial aid package is what it is, and now you're stuck. And so it's a really tough thing to do if you think that you might have some financial need. Early action, on the other hand, is amazing, and everyone should do it to as many schools as they can. You simply apply early, meaning October, November, and you hear back early, around December, and there are no drawbacks. You still get to wait until May 1st to decide where to enroll. You have all that extra time now to go and revisit schools if you feel you need to. And there's no disadvantage. The only time you would ever wait and not apply early somewhere is if you would benefit from an extra semester of grades or another round of SAT testing.
So you're finding most people are applying this early action these days, and this is why.
Okay. And the one disclaimer I just want to mention is there are some schools that have what's called early action single choice.
Okay.
If you apply there early action, you can't apply anywhere else. So it is important to check each individual school's website. Okay,
and with that, we're going to take a break and we're going to talk a little bit about financial aid. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. So Tanya, in the last segment, we were talking a bit about the importance of taking AP classes, but you told me this statistic at the commercial break that I do want you to share about our school district.
In the Hazleton area school district, 5% of students enroll in AP courses. I am certain that more than 5% of the students who live here are college bound, and so I just want all the parents to consider enrolling in those AP courses when those decisions can be made.
Unbelievable. With the average cost of private liberal arts schools being like $60,000 a year, what do you advise regarding financial aid?
Well, the first thing to know is even families with traditionally high incomes will still qualify for aid. There's something that you can do online. It's called the FAFSA Forecaster. It's FAFSA Forecaster. And you can go in and enter a lot of your financial information, and it can give you an estimate of what colleges would expect you to pay per year. So that's one really good tool that's out there. The other thing is there's some assets that are considered on the FAFSA form, which is the form you fill out for financial aid, and there's some assets that aren't. So you want to start early shifting your assets where it makes sense. For example, the equity in your own home is generally not considered in the process. Your retirement investments are not considered in the FAFSA form. If you have a 529 plan and it's in the grandparent's name, it's not a factor. And so you really want to start in middle school, in the early parts of high school, shifting your assets around so that you can go through this process successfully. The other thing to keep in mind is, for example, students who are seniors now, who are going to be entering college fall of 2018, it's the parents' 2016 taxes that are looked at for financial aid purposes.
Okay.
So you really need to start the process early.
How about social media? How has that changed the whole college application thing?
Well, it just gives students another thing to think about. Colleges will go and look at their social media pages, so they need to clean them up. And what they might feel is appropriate for a peer probably isn't appropriate for a college admission officer. So starting junior year, they need to get into their social media pages and delete posts that might be inappropriate.
Are there any other trends that are happening with regard to college admissions that you want to share as we wrap up the show?
Oh, definitely. The first one I'd love to talk about is demonstrated interest. This is something that was not tracked when you and I applied to school that is tracked very significantly now. So what it is, remember before we were talking about yield and how important that is to colleges. So in order to predict whether or not an accepted student is going to enroll, they want to see how interested is that student in us. Have they come to our campus for a tour? If we went and visited their high school, did they show up? Did they come to our table at a college fair and fill out one of those little sheets of paper that you fill out? Did they call the school to ask to be placed on the mailing list?
So they measure all of this.
They measure all of it, and they will give you a ranking.
Okay, we have less than 2 minutes. You want
Okay.
to talk about anything else as we close?
I'd like to talk about one other thing because it's a great tool for parents. It's called the College Data Set.
Okay.
And if you just type in a school that you might be interested, I'll use my alma mater, Common Data Set. Common Data Set, University of Richmond. It will show you everything that they count in the college admission process. Does demonstrated interest matter to them? Do they consider APs? Do they require SAT-2 testing, and so on? So it's a really good tool. I just want to make sure people know about.
Okay, and the last thing is, you did tell me that there are some test optional schools?
Yes, that's also a really new trend. And so even some of the most select schools in the country are test optional, which means that you don't have to submit any SAT, any ACT tests at all. And you can just be judged on the merits of your transcript and recommendations and so on. So I just want people to know that that's out there, and it's easy to Google and find out the list of schools.
Well, I have to say, Tanya, you are like my favorite guest of all time. Don't tell Mom, because she's been a guest too. And really, if you folks want to talk to Tanya, you can, again, check her out on her website. Her contact information is there. We've been pulling that up. She's also on Facebook. And remember, if you look around and you don't like what you see, if you're overwhelmed by the college process, don't complain about it. Get a counselor. Do something about it. And thank you for watching.